For nearly 4 decades, our next inductee was known as the voice of Canadian harness racing. Frank Salive has called 200,000 races at 75 different tracks, including some of the greatest moments in harness racing history. Known affectionately as the Velvet Fog for the smooth, immersive delivery of his knowledgeable and informative calls, he has provided the spoken words which punctuate countless life-changing moments of jubilation and triumph. He is, for all of us, the soundtrack to the replay reel in our memories, which constantly affirms our love for the sport. The Canadian Horse Racing Hall of Fame is very proud to induct Frank Salive.
Master of the class, getting the better of Awesome Delhi.
Leamington native Frank Salive, also known as the voice of Canadian standardbred racing, enjoyed a legendary career in the announcer's booth. Competing as a Junior A hockey goalie for the Peterborough Petes in the 70s opened doors for successful careers in broadcasting and announcing horse races for Salive. Bill Bennett, the Pete's play-by-play announcer, secured some part-time assignments for him at Chex TV, which included interviewing a young driver named Doug Brown at Kawartha Downs. Sudbury Downs announcer Ken LeDrew introduced Salive to announcing while he was working at CKSO Radio and TV in Sudbury in the late 70s. He relocated for a job at CBC Windsor, and when the station closed, an opportunity arose, and Salive found himself behind the mic at Windsor, Leamington, and Dresden raceways. From 1990 through 2005, Salive worked as the Ontario Jockey Club's standardbred track announcer at Greenwood Raceway, Woodbine Racetrack, and Mohawk Raceway. The 1993 Breeders' Crown Mares Trot, won by local favorite Lifetime Dream, was one of his most memorable race calls at Canada's premier racing circuit.
Trot has come on to be third. They're at the top of the stretch in the Cadillac Breeders' Crown. Lifetime Dream is trying to hold on. Coming to her is Armbro Keepsake. Lifetime Dream and Armbro Keepsake. Lifetime Dream is going to fulfill the Lifetime Dream.
Another of Salive's most revered race calls was the 2003 North America Cup, won by Yankee Cruiser.
And they turned down the stretch in the richest ever Canadian harness race, the 20th Pepsi North America Cup, into the critical final 8th of the mile. All-American native, All-American theory. Here comes LaChance with Artesian on the outside. All-American native, Yankee Cruiser moving up. Dean McGee for the memory of Brian Pinsky. Yankee Cruiser has won the 20th Pepsi North America Cup.
Salive left the OJC in 2005 to have more of a work-life balance. From 2005 through 2021, he called races at Western Fair, Clinton, Hanover, and Grand River Raceway, Pompano Park, and Fort Erie Racetrack.
Amise Gizmo is a romping away champion in the 2016 Prince of Wales Stakes.
He retired in March of this year from Ocean Downs in Maryland. Salive's formula for accurate, insightful race calling is strong memory work while serving 4 audiences: the wagering public, horse people, racetrack management, and the TV crew. Frank Salive called close to an estimated 200,000 horse races at 75 different racetracks throughout North America. His conversant, insightful calls and his silky smooth voice made the Velvet Fog a strong favorite in the horse racing community.
Making the presentation this evening to Frank are Jim Bannon, Ian Fleming, and myself.
Wow, you talk about a support network. Kelly Spencer, Jim Bannon, and Ian Fleming. That's like the 3 stars on Hockey Night in Canada. I want to acknowledge first my wife Jasmine in the audience, my friends, Tommy Turner for 40 years. Some of my extended family has traveled all the way from Trinidad and Tobago, so I want to acknowledge Haley, Vidya, and Rennie. My sister-in-law Usha, my niece Allison are here. Thanks all. It gives me great comfort to see you right there before me as I speak at the microphone. As a direct result of the excellence and exposure from Canadian harness racing, I got to work close to 25% of my career in the United States also, at tracks like Batavia Downs, Tioga Downs, Pompano Park. I did most of a meet one time at the old Calder Racecourse before it was permanently closed, and as recently as last year at Ocean Downs in Maryland. And the common denominator with my Canadian co-workers and the Americans is that they all treated me so well and made me feel so welcome and so much a part of the team. The introductory package had a couple of the most emotional moments. So I want to tell you a little bit about the story behind the story as it was unfolding for me in the press box on those nights. The 2003 North America Cup, and I was talking to Chris Christoforou about this, but it was very emotional because the winning co-owner trainer Tim Pinsky had just lost his son Brian before that race. He told me at the post-race reception that him and his wife were right under a speaker at Woodbine, and they dove into each other's arms weeping because my call included a mention of Brian coming to the wire. And I thought that really reinforces the power of our words as the race announcers of the modern era. The other race I should talk about, and this is an untold anecdote, the 1993 Breeders' Crown Mare's Trot, won by Lifetime Dream, and it was kind of a victory for the small man because it was owned by Joe Dunsmore, trained by Butch Elliott from Stratford and Clinton, Ontario. My former colleague Mike Hamilton and I had seen her progress for the 18 months previous, and that's why it was so special that night. What happened after the races, this story has never yet seen the light of day. Maybe Paul McDonnell came over to the Mohawk Inn after the races. Maybe Ian Fleming did. I hope he did. But it was a night of a post-race celebration, the likes of which I was never part of again. Because overnight we had storytelling, backslapping, food, beverage, BSing. It got to be 8:30 in the morning, and in those years we had a radio show in Toronto called the Racing Forum on Sports Radio The Fan 590. Dan Loisel and I hosted this show on alternating weeks. So the untold part of this story I'm coming to is that I was with Joe and Butch and all of the merriment surrounding the euphoria of Lifetime Dream at the Mohawk Inn till 8:30, and then an hour later I interviewed Butch and Joe on Sports Radio The Fan 590 from downtown Toronto. So that was the only time that I pulled that kind of an all-nighter. I couldn't do it now, but I could, but it'd take me 6 months to recover. I want to give great credit to a man who's no longer with us, who was my greatest career influence. And for the Americans watching, Steve Wolf of the U.S. Harness Writers Association, Tim Boharski down at Batavia Downs, Stanley F. Bergstein was by far and away the greatest influence on my career. Whenever I felt I was getting off the beaten path, I would consult his replays on YouTube. And I'm going to recite 3 races specifically for you to look at in your spare time. They are the 1965 Little Brown Jug, won by Brett Hanover, and those wonderful Hambletonians from back at DuQuoin, Illinois, of the 1970s, won by Speedy Crown and Speedy Somali. So those 3 races really embraced the wonderful, mellow, but informative and enthusiastic voice, the irreplaceable voice, really, of Stan Bergstein, my main mentor. Racing in recent years, for the announcer's point of view, evolved into storytelling. So in 1987, I asked Tom Durkin, who was doing the Meadowlands Standardbred meet at the time, I said, Tom, could I come spend a few nights with you in the booth at the Meadowlands? And he said, sure. So 4 nights in March of 1987, I got to spend in the booth with Tom Durkin at the Meadowlands, and that, of course, was when John Campbell and Bill O'Donnell were kings of the hill down there, and it was a real treat to have been there. But the storytelling aspect, the way Tom Durkin mentored me, was most embodied by a race that the Canadians will smile broadly at, because in 1991, Tom declared that it was Dance Smartly, the undisputed queen of racing on this continent. Dan Loisel, my great colleague for 16 years, taught me so much by example. And Dan came from a standardbred background. The 1985 North America Cup, if you ever care to look it up, Dan's words are still ringing in my ears this day, because in the stretch, it was staff director and Dave Wall, and the local horse is going to get it all. Dan also really impressed me with the way he kept fun in the game for the announcers. He had extreme fun, unforgettable fun, great, clean, human fun with Walloo Maloo, that you may remember. And I really love Dan's alliteration of the letter P, because in the 1990s, Dan declared it was Pietsky and Penna, picture perfect in the Prince of Wales Stakes. So thank you, Tom Durkin, Stan Bergstein, and Dan Loisel, for the profoundly positive impact you had on my life and career. I want to especially salute 2 fellow inductees tonight from my generation. Chris Christoforou, I was always envious of you because you had better hair and a better voice than me. And Jack Darling, also some of the best hair in harness racing. And I think we need an investigation by our regulator about what is in the water at Exeter and Ailsa Craig to find out why it's taking John Campbell and Jack Darling so much longer than the rest of us to go gray. So it would be very interesting to see. Maybe Jack will address that in his turn at the microphone. But you know what, Jack? You've had a Bulldog Hanover through your barn, so you can wear your hair like Tiny Tim if you so desire. Two quick anecdotes of the top literary efforts. I used to collect people's quotes over my career, and these are 2 that have stayed with me over the years. There was a roast about 30 years ago at Mohawk. Bill Wellwood, a Hall of Famer, agreed to be roasted in support of the Ontario Standardbred Adoption Society. So the poet laureate of harness racing, Dr. John Hayes, was one of the first at the microphone, and he broke the room into 155 decibel laughter with this rhyming couplet. Now, this was at the start of the Bill Wellwood roast in support of the Standardbred Adoption Society, and Dr. John Hayes went to the microphone and said, the program back in the day listed Bill Wellwood's weight as 135, well, this may have been true, but only when Christ was alive. The other anecdote that stayed with me over the years was my mentor, Stan Bergstein. In the early 1990s, there was a top-level trotter named No Sex Please, named after the British comedy television show. So Stan was the guest drawmaster for the Breeders' Crown. I think it was won by Chris with Earl, but he'll address that. But Stan, he said, next out of the entry box is No Sex Please with Ron Waples. And Stan made this perfect dramatic pause, and he said, No Sex Please and Ron Waples, well, there's two terms that don't go together. In conclusion, I'd just like to say it has been an absolute honor and privilege to escape the tomato fields around Leamington, which I started in, picking tomatoes for Heinz ketchup. A life like I've had has really only been made possible by something like my junior hockey team, of course, the Peterborough Petes, and Canadian horse racing. Lastly, just a very personal perspective about what this night means to me. When I stood on the blue line in Leningrad with my Pete's teammates at the conclusion of the First World Junior early in 1974 and heard "O Canada," it brought a feeling of overwhelming gratitude and humility. And at the time, I remember thinking, well, that was a one-off. I'll never feel like that again. But thanks to this wonderful Hall of Fame, I have that feeling again. Thank you so much to the Canadian Horse Racing Hall of Fame. God bless you, good luck, and good racing.